Voice Radio.
And welcome to Kind Voice on Books. I'm your host, David Levins, and today's our very first show from Colorado Springs, Colorado. And on today's show, I'm thrilled to have Joanna Penn on. Joanna is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of thrillers under the name J.F.Penn, and she also writes nonfiction books for authors with 20 books selling in 74 countries and 5 different languages. She's a professional speaker and an award-winning entrepreneur. Her website's really cool. It's called The Creative Pen, and that's PENN.com. And it's regularly voted one of the top 10 websites for writers. Today's show is going to focus on a fascinating article she wrote called Virtual Reality and the Future of Publishing. Joanna, welcome to the program.
Hi, David.
Oh, good to have you. Good to have you. I appreciate you coming on today.
No worries. It's lovely to be on the show.
Good deal. And you wrote this very fascinating article that just has amazing content in it. So I want to kind of paint a picture. It's called Virtual Reality and the Future of Publishing. What would a virtual bookstore look like?
Okay, well, so first of all, I think some people don't really know what virtual reality is, and the technology is not sort of out there in the mainstream yet, but basically it's when you put on a headset and you're essentially in a space that looks more like your reality. So you're actually, instead of, sitting in front of a computer screen and shopping on, say, Amazon.com, you're actually in a bookstore. So for me, as a book reader and as an author, the idea that you could, you want to go shopping for a book, but it might be, a big drive to your nearest physical bookstore, that you could put on a headset and then actually be within a bookstore itself. So you would, there are headsets that even include smell. So you could have that book smell that some people love. You could also, for me, what's exciting is you could have different bookstores catered to different people. So, for example, I really like Stephen King. So I might like a bookstore that's catered to my darker type of thrillers that I like to read, whereas someone else might be a romance reader, and the bookstore might be tailored more to the type of books they like. So that's a kind of basic level of what the virtual reality bookstore to me would be. It would be, you'd get that same experience, but you wouldn't have to travel a long way to your closest bookstore, because most people in the world don't actually live near a bookstore.
Now, can you see a virtual reality bookstore being created in a physical place?
Yes, so what you might have there is, we all know that there are many millions of books in the world, and that each physical bookstore does not hold the stock to actually show all the books. So you might actually go to your local Barnes & Noble or whatever shop and enter into the virtual reality space. Now, that might be putting on a headset, it might be sort of going into some kind of booth, and then you can actually start to look at the different types of books that you might be interested in. And I actually have one of these booths in my Arcane novels. I don't know if any of your listeners have been to Oxford or the Radcliffe Camera. It's a very famous library, the Bodleian Library in Oxford. And, there are many ancient texts that people might want to read, and you could do it in this sort of virtual reality space and get a real sense of, you might be in your local bookstore in Indiana in America, but you could suddenly walk into this space and it's, big towering windows and beautiful architecture, and you're there in virtual reality at Oxford University, for example. So I definitely think you could have this add-on to the bookstore physical space.
And can the bookstore owners or employees go into the virtual? Is there an advantage for them to go into this virtual reality space and guide their customers through it?
Yeah, and in fact, I think this will make the job of being a bookstore owner or a librarian would be another thing. So you actually get to curate the type of bookstore that people might see. Because I think it must be very frustrating for people who work in bookstores when they don't have access to all these cool things that they, actually in the physical store. So if you're a bookstore owner, and what I'm also thinking is that, as readers, you could curate a store as well. So I could create a store about the books that I like that people could enter. But what it would mean is the bookstore owner could make these different environments. And I'm sure many people know Harry Potter, the sort of Diagon Alley scene where you walk down the street and there's all these different bookstores. So maybe if you're, you head up a section at Borders, Barnes and Noble, Borders disappeared, right? But you walk down this virtual street, and as I said, there might be the horror section or a horror bookstore or a romance bookstore. But as the bookstore owner, you would actually curate that. And this is a big deal because, of course, physical bookstores are struggling in the digital world. And what I could see this doing is provide an income stream for people who will curate their recommendations. So I think it could actually provide independent bookstores as well as bigger chains a real chance to increase the amount of sales they make, even if it's like commission through to other stores, and that would really help.
I'm trying to picture this. Do you see like a virtual reality company creating different spaces, like a Stephen King thriller type bookstore or a Thoreau philosophy type bookstore, and then the bookstore owners and employees going into this already curated spaces and interacting with their customers there?
Well, it will be interesting to see what happens, because what I'm thinking more about is there are these platforms that are being built at the moment, so almost like Second Life, which people might have heard of, which at the moment is kind of in a screen and you control a little avatar, whereas what Facebook's doing, and Facebook own Oculus, which is one of the bigger virtual reality systems, is really looking at building platforms where other companies can build on top of. So it's like, if we think about Facebook, Facebook owns Facebook.com, but an author or a company or a personality will have a Facebook page. So what I'm thinking is that the virtual reality world will just be like an internet, but it will be around you as opposed to just on a screen. So you'll still have to go to an address within that world, but it means that I could build a bookstore, you could build a bookstore, or your kind voice could have a bookstore with books that fit with your brand and the things that you promote, the different charities and stuff like that. So this would mean, and this is a few years away, obviously, but what this would mean is that people get a chance to build that on top of an existing platform. And I know virtual reality is a little far away, but I did want to mention the sort of augmented reality, which we're seeing right now with Pokemon Go. So people are actually seeing a layer of reality on top of the world on their phones. So and when this is obviously happening right now, whereas the virtual reality stuff seems a little bit further away. But I think the whole Pokemon Go sort of on top of the real world thing will take off. And if you think about that for bookstores, you could do similar things. You could be like, okay, overlay different covers, because one of the things that's very annoying is different covers and different titles per book in different countries. And you could test different covers with this type of alternate reality. So I see all these different technologies coming together, but providing a platform for lots of different people to build their virtual stores on top.
It's a fascinating future. Now, have you walked into bookstores where bookstore owners are doing this to some degree?
No, not yet. I mean, there have been people who have talked about doing this, but what's interesting is I interviewed a guy who does some virtual reality stuff, and he was saying that he thinks that people will do more, would rather be inside a story, like the Pokemon Go idea, where you go in and find different things. But the other thing was commuters. So if you're, say, on a subway in New York City or in London, that you can shut out the world, so you could put on your headset and you could actually be on a beach reading your book. So the question, there's these two kind of poles apart of, will people just put on a headset and read as usual in a virtual reality space to make the world a bit more exciting, or will they actually want to stop reading and become part of the world and actually do active things within virtual reality? And I think for creative people, both of these offer exciting possibilities.
Now, as a writer, if you were to write books that will be sold in a virtual reality bookstore and maybe incorporate this virtual reality experience, would you write your books differently to do better in a space like that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an exciting opportunity around data if we can get that, and this is starting to happen. Kobo, for example, have released some data on what percentage people stop reading books. So that's something that would be useful, and I think if you had that within virtual reality, you might be able to get that data more easily than we can right now, where it kind of you just don't know, because a lot of people are reading on a physical book, and also if they're reading on a Kindle, for example, that's all proprietary data. But so I think I definitely think about that, but also thinking about writing for gaming. A lot of people write books that can be made into games or films, which I think would be similar to what you could do for virtual reality. But I think that writing nonfiction is also really important, because one of the biggest reasons that Facebook have talked about with Oculus is education. So I'm sure a lot of people listening read nonfiction books or do training courses, for example. And certainly with my nonfiction books, I would fully expect to for example, have a narration or a class, so people could get the book, but they might also want to sign up for a live in virtual reality class where they can come along, and even though I'm in England and they are in Venezuela or America or whatever, we can actually still be in the same physical space. And it means for things like this, for podcasting, we could meet in virtual reality, and people could come and sit in our virtual reality space, which would be much cooler than, listening through a computer, for example. And I can't see you and you can't see me. But if we were in a virtual reality space, we would be able to interact in a different way. So I think there's a lot of potential that goes beyond just the reading of a book. I think being part of a fictional world is cool, but also the training side and the interaction that you could have on the non-fiction side too.
Interesting. We had a do-it-yourself video person on, Vanessa Vargas. She's one of the top do-it-yourself video people. Like I looked up how to make Oreo ice cream, and she was doing that. But she also does like organic garden building furniture. Anything do-it-yourself, this lady does. And she brought people together for a quilting seminar in Florida. But with this new virtual reality world, people can bring people together virtually and save the plane fare.
Yes, exactly. And I think that will mean it's amazing. I mean, many of us are already using Skype to, I'm phoning you on Skype, but you can talk face to face, on Skype with people across the world. And I just see the virtual reality space as being an extension of that, where you can actually, be totally immersed. And in fact, one of the sort of applications of virtual reality already for training is the military. So people are doing that, and also medical doctors. So instead of, having to, obviously we want our doctors to work on bodies. So when they work on our own bodies, it's fine. Yeah. But they, sometimes there's not enough dead bodies for them to work on. So, they can actually do some of their training in virtual reality, and that's like proper practice. So I think it's awesome what they're already doing with virtual reality and training. Google Expeditions has been rolling out with Google Cardboard, which is I think the cheapest virtual reality, which you can use with your iPhone, and you can go on these expeditions, and they're using them in schools, so kids can go underwater and be sort of a virtual fish, which is very cool. And there's even one of the most popular things to do with these drones now is to put a virtual reality headset on, like a camera onto the drone, and put it over your face, so that you're flying your tiny little drone, but more like as if you were in Star Wars, which is very cool. So I think, people will use VR for these experiences on their own, and for fun, and for gaming, and for training, but also for meetings. And as you say, not flying all the way, although as a travel junkie, I hope to still be flying places and doing exciting things.
Wow, there's just so much going on in your answer. So I want to think through what you just said. We're going to pause for a first break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Hi, I'm Claire Bloom, and I started End 68 Hours of Hunger to put bags of food in the hands of local children who have little or nothing to eat for the 68 hours between the free lunch they get in school on Friday and the free breakfast they get in school on Monday. Our vision is to end childhood hunger in America one school at a time, and that's how we operate. We start programs wherever we have 2 volunteers in a community who are prepared to step up and take responsibility for running the program, and we grow from there. Today, we're feeding 900 children each weekend in 29 communities, and we're growing. If you're interested in starting a program in your community, please visit our website at www.end68hoursofhunger.org and click on the tab at the top of the page that says FAQ. Everything you need to know about starting a program is there, including videos on how to talk with groups, how to set up your space, and even what kind of food to include in the bags. Feel free to reach out to me at end68hoursofhunger@gmail.com.
A Kind Voice Radio.
And welcome back to Kind Voice on Books. We're here with Joanna Penn. Joanna, welcome back to the program.
Yeah, great to be here.
Good deal. So I'll tell a little quick story about a lady whose car broke down in a very bad neighborhood and it caught fire. And some men helped her put out the fire, and they were very brave. And she was in a state of shock. And when she turned around to thank the men, they were gone. So she couldn't thank them. So she wrote this book, Pay It Forward, that became a worldwide movement of how people can show gratitude to each other by paying it forward. So I'm very fascinated by the idea of something that was fictional that moves into the reality space. How do you think a virtual reality bookstore, or in general, the way people interact with books, because there's so much good in books, how do you think the virtual interactions can help bring things to reality? Because I think virtual reality is between imagination and the real world.
Yeah, I think that I see what you're saying, but the definition of virtual reality at this point is almost like you're just stepping into you're stepping into a different world, but it's still a kind of reality, which is why it is this virtual reality. Which is why I think, for example, about doing a book launch in the catacombs of Paris. I would be in my living room and you would be in your living room, but we would meet in a virtual space, which would be the catacombs of Paris. Now, we wouldn't actually be in the catacombs of Paris, but it would look like it. And to the people who were there, it would feel like that. So it would actually, the ambience and the way that people could look around and they could see all the cool different things that were there, as well as be at a book launch. So I think it's not like, I think there's definitely a sort of Star Trek idea for some things. You can, especially for gaming, you can go into a gaming world and play something that really is made up. But when I think of virtual reality as like the internet, I'm actually thinking about doing things that will impact the physical world. So let's say we are virtually in the Paris catacombs. I'm talking about my latest book, and then people can actually order it and even read it right there in the space. And, already with the different gloves that you can get for virtual reality world, you could touch the pages if you really like the physical thing. Then all you would do is just order it and then it would be delivered. So you would actually be in a virtual reality space like a book launch, and then the thing would appear magically, it would be delivered if you ordered, a physical book. And I think that, retail and shopping, which is the basis of book sales, as you say, it delivers a lot of, good things to people. That model can be used in a lot of different ways. Let's say charities. So some of the charities that the Kind Voice is associated with, instead of people just getting an advert in their ear that says, what about these, kids who are going hungry, you can actually step into a world and you can see some of these kids, and they would be real kids. It wouldn't be like a made up thing. It would be a real thing. It's just you would experience it a lot more. So I actually think this would mean that people were a lot more empathetic. It also, there's some really good applications around, say, mental health. So, many of us don't understand what having autism feels like for the person who has autism. But by going into a virtual reality experience, you could actually feel that yourself. So instead of just reading a book on autism, you could go into this virtual reality space and actually be that person. So I think it might give people a chance to empathize a lot more. One area where I think it's interesting is they've already found, some people have these nightmares that, people will go into these really violent games and, first-person shooter games and stuff. But what they've already shown with the virtual reality space is that that's too much for people. So if you read, Stephen King, you might not want to go into a virtual reality Stephen King book. People actually would rather fly, be a virtual reality bird, which I think is just amazing. So what it's doing is it's actually, people want to feel positive things, and what virtual reality gives you is a much more experiential thing. So instead of being stuck in your house in the middle of nowhere, you could actually be flying like a bird, and surely that will make you feel happier, and that has got to be a good thing.
Absolutely. And one of the missions at A Kind Voice is to make the world a kinder, more connected place. And just in listening to you speak, there's so many different ways virtual reality can connect people and help them walk in each other's shoes to connect in new ways and create new channels and circuitry to connect the good.
Yeah, definitely. And just taking that further, a lot of us read these books by people who've gone through very difficult circumstances or who experience the world in a certain way. And, it will hopefully give people a chance to try these things out. And I think it will just increase the connectivity. And, even just like, we're talking and I'm phoning over the internet, or when I do a podcast and I'm connecting to people on Skype. Skype video calling has really changed the world in terms of how people can connect. And now they've got the translator, so Skype real-time translation, so people can talk to each other in different languages. So imagine that in virtual reality world. So, we can actually speak to people in English and they can understand us in Japanese, for example. That type of thing is going to bring the world together even more.
There's so much going on. And beyond virtual reality, a lot of the things on your website are designed to bring people together. Like there's so many stories with a kind voice that I'd like to tell, but I'm not a writer. I say things very concisely. I'd love to be able to connect with a writer and co-write a book, someone who could see characters and bring ideas to life in more nuanced ways than I'm capable of. You wrote a whole book on co-writing and how people co-write together. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Co-writing, as to how I'm doing it for fiction, is mainly authors who have existing brands coming together and writing something together, so that you create a kind of a new voice together, but also your existing fan base really enjoy the book. So I co-wrote a book called Risen Gods, set in New Zealand, with Jay Thorne, who is an American, and I've never met him. So he's an American man, I'm a British woman, and we've never met in real life. We basically came up, I know him, we've talked on the phone, we've Skyped, we've seen each other on video Skype, but it's a great example of something that would be even better in virtual reality, because we could actually sit there and type, next to each other in some virtual library space. But as it was, we came up with an idea, and then essentially he would get up first. Well, yeah, he would be up first. Oh, no, I'm up first because I'm ahead of America in terms of time. So I would get up in the morning, I would write, a couple of thousand words, and then he would get up and he would read what I wrote and he would write a couple of thousand words. So, it's similar to, on a basic level, the kind of chain letter you might have written when you were a kid, or you write a few sentences and then you turn over the page, so that people can only see the last line. And then, of course, we had it edited and all that type of thing. And the voice in the book is a combination of both of our ideas and our minds. But I would definitely say that that is a different idea of co-writing to, there's a lot of people who do co-writing where one person comes up with ideas and the other person writes it. One good example is James Patterson, who has a lot of co-writers who do his various books. He does a lot of the ideas and they do the writing. So there's a lot of different ways to do co-writing. writing. And then, of course, there's ghostwriting, where someone else writes it for you, but your name goes on the front. So all of these are different ways of publishing. But what I like about it, as you have said, is that kind of voices across the world connecting and creating something new that you wouldn't have been able to do on your own. And Jay and I are just talking about doing some more collaboration next year, and I definitely am doing more and more of that, because I think 1 + 1 can equal 3 rather than 2 when you do it this way, especially if you have an audience. 2 lots of audiences can really help sell the book as well.
I mean, the potential of all this is so amazing as a way to connect with one's customers. Of course, books, historically have been static things after the author wrote them, and they come alive when they're read by the reader. But in this virtual space, author may write a story one way, and then at a point the reader may want to take it a different way, and they could kind of rework the story to create a whole different book. It's kind of like an intersection of books and improvisation and maybe gaming.
Yeah, you're right. And in fact, there's a website that's really good for that type of thing called Wattpad, wattpad.com. And it's really popular with people writing fan fiction. So fan fiction is similar to what you're saying. It's people writing in an established world. So they, take their favorite books and the real world things and write stories about them. And I think something like Wattpad could definitely be, put into the virtual reality space. And I love that idea. And in fact, Kindle has Kindle Worlds, where people can write in the worlds of established authors, which is also very cool. So I think we're coming into a creative time where people are more free to create, and that you can put your work out there much more easily now. You don't have to wait years and years to see a published book on a shelf. And that's why coming, kind of full circle to the curation of the store owners and the curation of readers, that will be more and more important, because of course there are so many books and so many things created all the time that we need the curation more and more.
Yes, there's so much content out there. Now, you mentioned Kindle World, where readers can go into the world created in a specific story and then start to write from that story and create something new.
Yes, it's a great program, and only if people Google Kindle World, you can find the different books that are available. But yeah, it's only open to Americans, unfortunately.
Now, let me take a final break for a good news report, and then we'll come back with this question. We'll be right back after this good news report.
Tell us about the good news today.
Hi everyone, this is Brianna Dinsher with your Good News Report, where we deliver happy and exciting news from all over the world. This week we have a very uplifting story from Lake Charles, Louisiana, where a firefighter rescued 6 baby ducks. The most interesting part is that he brought them to safety with the help of his iPhone. After he was notified that several ducklings had been caught in a drain, firefighter Cody Necht headed out to the location and created quite of a clever plan. He wriggled into the drain and got this bright idea to impersonate the duckling's mother using the quack, quack, quack ringtone on his iPhone. His idea did in fact work, and after about an hour and a half, 4 of the 6 ducklings were rescued. The remaining 2 came out later, and all 6 were finally reunited with their mother. This is definitely a very cute and unique story, because it is not every day that you hear of someone spending so much time with such a brilliant trick to rescue little ducklings. In my opinion, Cody is definitely using his kind heart to bring more love to his neighborhood and is helping the small creatures in his community. This week's quote of the week comes from the great Dr. Seuss. Today you are you. That is truer than true. There is no one alive who is youer than you. Thank you for listening to today's report, and I hope that you continue to use your kind voice to bring happiness to others. Take care, guys.
Kind Voice Radio.
And welcome back to Kind Voice on Books. I'm David Levins, and we're here with best-selling author Joanna Penn. Joanna, welcome back to the program.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is great fun.
Oh, good deal. And your website is fascinating, thecreativepen.com. I know it's one of the best websites for authors, but you get a whole ecosystem of things going on that site. Can you talk a little bit about your website?
Yeah, sure. And it's great to hear that good news report that you just played, because that's kind of my vibe online as well. It's that, I think creating is amazing. And when I started the Creative Pen back in 2008, when I wrote my first book, and I got ripped off and a number of things happened that I just thought, I don't want these things to happen to other people. So I started the website in order to share what I learned along the way. And I think that's a really good place, and a reason why many people start a website is to share their lessons learned. So basically, since then, I've written non-fiction books and fiction, and I just share what I learn along the way. And that's the basis of the site. And along the way, of course, I've written books, I do courses, I do speaking around the world. But the overarching sort of reason behind the Creative Pen is trying to empower creatives and people who would like to be creative to not have to wait to be told you are chosen. It's sort of choose yourself, pick yourself, put your words out into the world. And, this is a very exciting time to be an author. So, I publish all over the world. I make a very good living, and all without a publisher. So I'm an indie author, a proud independent author, and I love what I do. It's just fantastic. So my message is a very positive one of creation and empowerment and helping other people on the way.
And you also have all these brilliant podcasts on the website. There's just so much content from different areas. As a fiction writer, before you became a fiction writer, were you kind of able to visualize a story you wanted to create before you actually created it?
Yeah, I think that what is amazing about writing fiction is, or writing books in general, is that you realize the truth of what is in your mind can become reality, which we all know, and that we're surrounded by things that were in people's mind and have become reality, and that, you creating your own future. So yes, with a fiction, with a novel, it's exactly the same deal. It's like I think about a character in a situation, and I write about I have an Arcane series, which is like a secret agency that tackles supernatural mysteries around the world. And, I just like coming up with things that are exciting, and people, my characters solve the mysteries and get to travel around the world. And a lot of the travel stuff is based on my own journeys, because I'm a bit of a travel junkie, as I said. So yeah, basically the what fiction comes down to is a character in a setting and something happens, and do they win or do they lose? Do they get out of it? What changes along the way? So as with the human life, there are so many different variations on that theme, and it's a lot of fun. But I would say to people that obviously there's a lot of different skill and craft involved in writing a novel, as there is with any kind of creative habit, I guess, but that I always encourage people to have a go.
Interesting. Now, before you did this, you had an office job. Is that correct?
Yes, I used to implement accounts payable systems into large corporates, which is super boring.
And you visualized did you visualize yourself as a character in a story you wanted to create, or was it just a case of setting goals and then making them happen?
Well, it's a really good point. And what I did, this was sort of 10 years ago now, I actually wrote an affirmation. So I was really miserable in my job, like many people in the corporate world. I was just like, what is the point in what I'm doing? They're paying me very well, but I just don't like what I do. And so I wrote down an affirmation, because, of course, you have to figure out what you want to do with your life. Otherwise, you can't make it happen. So I wrote down, 10 years ago, I am creative. I am an author. And this was way before I ever thought I was creative, and I definitely wasn't an author. So this was, 2006. So I wrote it down, and, I'm a big fan of Tony Robbins and Jack Canfield, who does the Chicken Soup books and the Success Principles. And I used to just, I said these words in my head, and then I started saying them out loud. And then I started taking action around making that happen. So I am creative. I started going to art galleries, and I started trying to write notes, and I started reading books like The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And then I started to research how you wrote a book, and then basically kept taking those steps. And it was in September 2011, I was able to leave my job to become a full-time author entrepreneur. So basically it took 5 years from when I first said those words to when I was able to leave my job, which is pretty amazing. And now I've got all these books, and it just is about deciding what you want in life and setting those goals and working towards them, and having that positive mindset along the way.
No, that's a beautiful story, and I think anyone in that situation right now could really take good inspiration from what you're saying. As I'm listening to you, you also talk about kind of feeding that creative side through travel, visiting art galleries, maybe reading. How important is it to travel and do those things to kind of build the person you want to become?
Well, I know travel isn't for everybody, and I know that some people obviously can't afford to do that so much. But I think the main thing to consider is that the creative well, that sort of stuff inside you that produces things, you can't let it run dry. And when people get writer's block a lot of the time, or they're feeling like I used to feel at my day job, just like crying and empty inside, it's because you haven't filled that creative well. And you can fill that through reading. There's a lot of great TV now as well, like, on Netflix. We're just watching at the moment a documentary on North Korea, and I'm like, I'm never going to go to North Korea, but watching this documentary is really interesting, and it's giving me loads of ideas about stories and settings, and watching it is like, wow, this is amazing. So you can travel virtually, and obviously hopefully when virtual reality gets a lot bigger, people can do that, but also reading books, watching things, going to local events. Even like when I first started, I went to a local farmer's market and just kind of sat there and looked at people and, wondered who they were and what they did with their life. And, it's basically, and Julia Cameron in The Artist's Way, which is a great book, talks about the artist's date, where you set some time for yourself to actually just go and experience something and then write down what you feel about it and start to kind of get in touch with how you feel on a creative level. So just that setting time aside for yourself is a super important thing. If you want to produce in a creative manner, you have to make time to fill that creative well.
I like the way you described it, that creative well. You mentioned Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. Are there other books that kind of help people grow into artists that you'd recommend?
Well, lots. I read thousands and thousands of books. I recommend a lot on my podcast and on my website. I would say one that's come out recently, it's called Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. That's a really excellent book and has a lot about sort of getting over the fear associated with being creative. She's famous for the book that became the movie Eat, Pray, Love, and is, a sort of a non-fiction writer, memoir writer, and also a fiction writer. But the book Big Magic really helped me as well, and I think it would help anyone who has fear around creating, whether that's fear of wasting time, or fear of failure, or fear of being embarrassed, or self-censorship, or we all struggle with issues around fear. So that would be a good recommendation.
Interesting. Now, do you have any core, because we're coming to the end of our time, so do you have any core values or statements or quotations that drive you professionally to create what you've created?
Well, there's a book that I really recommend, another one called The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. So a lot of what Stephen Pressfield writes in that book is I reread that a lot. But on my wall, I have some of his quotes, but I have a kind of overarching quote on my wall that I look at every day, and it says, "Have you made art today?" And so it's really to kind of keep me focused on what have I created in the world that will help people, that will educate people, that will inspire people, will entertain people. Entertaining people is just as important, having a laugh or experiencing things. So have you made art today something I look at and go, okay, what have I done today to put something new into the world? What am I working towards in my own creativity? How am I helping people? And I think that those are words that I definitely live by.
I mean, that's a beautiful thing. And then from a business point of view, you talk about customers, some on your website. You're kind of serving a customer in putting this art out into the world. How much do you think about the business side of it when you put your art out into the world?
Well, I write the things that I want to read, and I create the things that I need to find out myself. And I think that's a really good way, especially as a writer, is you are your audience. So the last book I wrote was the nonfiction was the Successful Author Mindset, and it was a lot about the mindset of being an author. And I needed to write that book for myself to kind of figure out what I felt around being a creative. But what's amazing is lots of authors have read it and say that it's really valuable to them too, because we're like the same person, really. Creatives often suffer from the same issues, whether they're writing books or painting or whatever. So I think that's a really good way to think about customers, is often if you're just doing what you would love the most in the world, that will serve your customer in the best way, and they will hopefully then pay you to carry on creating. So yeah, I think about the business side a lot, but what I create always comes from what I love. I'm never just writing to market or creating things just to sell. It's always got to have value.
Joanna, you're like a treasure room of good wisdom. So it's been such a pleasure having you on the program. Did you have any thoughts that you'd like to leave our audience with before we close out?
Well, come on over to thecreativepenn.com, and there's lots of things on the podcast, the Author 2.0 Blueprint, lots of things that people can find if they're interested in creating their own books. And I'm always open for questions on Twitter at @thecreativepenn. Excellent,
Joanna. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, David.
Good deal. Have a great day. That was Joanna Penn. Her website's thecreativepenn.com, spelled with 2 N's. And she just said so much on how to share one's kind voice and how to turn fiction into reality, because there's so much good going on in the world. And hopefully we could all use our kind voices to make our world a kinder, more connected place. This is David Levins for Kind Voice on Books, wishing you a good day.
nothing wrong with reaching out when you need. I'll be there for you, and maybe you can be for me. With a kind voice, a few kind words, an open ear for when you need to be heard, a warm heart, we can make that choice to be a kind voice, a few kind words, an open ear for when you need to be heard, a warm heart, we can make that choice to be a kind voice.